I grew up in an era where I could not exercise my franchise. I could not exercise my vote. I was regarded as an enemy of the state. But having a society where I can express my will, and that is why some of the things happening in the States really, really irritates me, where people's democratic rights are trampled on. I have the right to run for office if I want to. I have the right to express myself. I have the right to have whatever opinion I want about Hamas, about Palestine, about whoever I want to.
Welcome to Crossing the Line. This podcast is made possible by the support of Mobilearn, who has given us access to the cutting-edge technology. Thank you, Mobilearn, for your support. My name is Ryland Fisher, and I will be your host. My guest today is Donny Jurgens, well known for his sports activism over many decades and for being a formidable sports administrator. He is somewhat lesser known as an educator who teaches young people to use sports for development as opposed to simply sports development, which is something completely different and which we will explore later in the show. I've known Donny for more than 40 years, but I'm still excited to learn more about him, especially his new ideas and interesting perspectives. Online, we have a few of Donny's friends and colleagues who have joined us in this meeting. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Please use the form provided, and I will ask the questions on your behalf. So, good afternoon, Mr. Jurgens, and how are you today?
Good day, Ireland. Thanks for having me as part of this podcast series, and I wish you all the best. Now, I'm feeling great. Always a tad nervous before I do things like this, but looking forward to our conversation.
Well, if you think you're feeling nervous, you must know how I'm feeling. So, I like to allow my guests to introduce themselves. So please tell me a little bit about yourself. Maybe let's start by talking about how your early political activism has influenced just about everything you have done in your life.
Yeah, I can comfortably say now at the age of 64 that a lot of my political involvement shaped to a large extent who I am, what I know today. It started for me at high school, believe it or not. I was at Oaklands and we had quite a few teachers from the New Unity movement that identified a couple of us and started giving us political education. And then I joined the Hanover Park Youth Movement. And I don't want to detail all of that, but my involvement in Hanover Park, in Mitchell's Plain, in Tafelsig, in the youth, to a large extent, as I said, shaped who I am today.
Thank you. So, when did you know that you wanted to be involved in sports administration and later education?
Look, from high school already, I was very keen on sport. I was never a good sports person. I represented the school at 800 and 1,500 meters, so it wasn't that part that really intrigued me. But I got involved in the administration and management of sport through that. And being a teacher, I'm a teacher by profession. I got involved with school sport. And I would almost say the rest is history. After 10 years as a teacher, which I enjoyed tremendously, I then started a number of careers in sport.
Okay. And so maybe you can take us to some of the highlights of your career in sports administration.
Look, there are very many highlights. It's going to be tough to summarize, but so for example, I've served on a few national structures, and that is always a highlight. You're active at a national level, even at a continental level in gymnastics.
So can you maybe mention some of the
I'll mention a couple, yeah. So for example, I served on the National Executive Committee of South African Golf. I was the president of Gymnastics South Africa for quite a few years. I served on the African Gymnastics Sports for All Committee. Sport, from a highlight perspective, has also enabled me to see a bit of the world that I probably would not have been able to see. I did papers at numerous conferences, attended many world congresses, so quite a number of highlights for me. I would say maybe just to highlight one, when I was a sports administrator at the University of Cape Town, I won a scholarship funded by, initiated and facilitated by Desmond Tutu that you spoke about early on. And I spent a semester in Pennsylvania at Penn State University. And during that time, I learned a lot. It was so yeah. I would say that's also included in some of my highlights. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, with highlights also come lowlights. So maybe talk about some of the lowlights that you've experienced.
Yeah, I must admit there hasn't been that many. One of the lowlights that stands out for me occurred last year, June the 19th. I'll never forget the day. When I was kicked out of Gymnastics South Africa. I mean, I thought I was leading the organization in a positive direction, and there were other forces that decided my time was up. So I would say that was a bit of a low light. But to be honest with you, maybe that's my nature. I don't let things get me down. So there hasn't been that many low lights, I mean, to be very honest.
But maybe about Gymnastics South Africa, do you feel that you were taking the organization on a trajectory that people who were kind of rooted in the past didn't quite agree with?
Yeah, I tried my best to find the reasons for that, but I suspect that is it. If you look at the demographics of the people that replaced us, it suggests to me that there were people still stuck in the past that perhaps not appreciative of the direction myself and my vice president was taking the organization. So from a perspective of transformation, even in high performance, we fought for, amongst others, to get our athletes back to the Olympics. We started initiatives that tried to grow gymnastics at all levels in all parts of the country. So I don't really know what the reasons were, but from my perspective, I think we were taking the organization in a positive trajectory.
So maybe let's talk about some of the people who have been influential and inspirational role models as you have crafted your career over the past few decades. Can you maybe mention one or two?
Yes, certainly in the early days, I was a member of SACOS at a very young age. I represented my club, Crusaders Tennis Club, as a delegate to tennis meetings and many other meetings. And in those early days, being part of SACOS, they were really amazing administrators that you could literally sit at their feet and learn. And amongst others in tennis, for example, the late Colin Clark stands out. He was the secretary, his minutes always meticulous and on time. When I was in school sport, the late Armin Darcy, father of the late Junaid Darcy that we both know. Again, Armin Darcy, again, a person that you could just simply learn from. On the political side, I remember the likes of Terra Lakota running sessions for us at Dora Falk back in the day. And that stage, really learning a lot. Cameron Dugmore, again, people that stands out from a sporting perspective as well. Trevor Manuel, I got to mention in his book, we weren't going to that at this stage. But again, being involved in the UDF, being involved in CACO, and then some really close comrades, which includes you, of course, as leaders. I learned from Trevor Westwyk, my president in CACO. So I can really, there's a number of, I would say, seminal people that supported me and that I learned from as life goes along.
So you clearly have a wealth of experience. And do you feel that your experience is valued enough by the powers that be in South Africa today?
Sure, that's a tough question. One doesn't want to speak about oneself. And again, maybe it's my nature. You look around you and you see people in leadership positions, and you sometimes ask the question, but that honestly doesn't really faze me whether I've been recognized enough or not. I mean, we spoke about highlights. I think I've done enough. I've been in positions high enough, so I'm not going to make that point that I should be in a higher position than what I am, you know.
But do you feel that, irrespective of position, that you could be contributing more to helping sports, particularly in our society?
Yeah, and it's for me really more than sport. My background is not only in sport, and you know that. It's really about using sport, even culture. You know, I very much was involved in culture back in the day. Using those elements as tools to uplift society and to uplift individuals. And I think in that respect, there's a lot more that I can do, but it's not only about me, it's that we can do as society to address some of the key challenges, but using different and innovative approaches. And I think in that respect, we are absolutely not doing enough.
So how do you feel about the calls in some quarters for older people to step aside and let young people take the reins?
No, absolutely. And again, as we often refer to ourselves as senior comrades, as let's call ourselves elder statesmen or senior comrades, that is really the legacy that we need to begin to focus on now, is to quite proactively identify young people, not step aside, but play a different role. Play a role of mentoring, passing on your experience before you depart from this earth. So I'm very, very much in favor of really taking youth development and youth leadership development in particular much more seriously than we currently are. And I'm fortunate to be part of a few initiatives that's trying to address this, ask those hard questions. Why are young people not voting? Why are young people not participating in shaping independent development plans? So I would be in total agreement with you that youth leadership development, succession planning, should really be key to what we focus on going forward.
So, yeah, we're talking about young people, and I believe you spend a lot of time teaching young people at the UCT and elsewhere, I suppose. And can you tell me what makes what you teach so different to anything else? And what is the difference between sports development and using sport for development?
Yeah, let me start with that last question. And again, people who are not involved with sport don't really appreciate this particular aspect. And so we have almost literally two worlds apart. One world of sports development, so that would be all your federations that falls under SACOS, that's focusing on developing their particular sports. And then there is a youth sports for all movement, nationally and internationally, a different organization that's quite proactively and deliberately using sport as a tool for development. So what does that mean? On the one hand, it focuses on individuals. So developing a Ryland Fisher holistically using sport as a tool. Not so much concerned about whether he's going to win the 100 meters or not, but whether he's going to be a good citizen, whether he's going to have values, whether he's going to have respect, whether he's going to have communication skills, leadership skills. And there are programs which I've been involved in presenting that deliberately focuses on developing individuals holistically. So just to give you one simple example, I've been part of developing a manual, a volleyball manual. So in volleyball, you get a skill like spiking. Now there would be a lesson where you learn how to spike, but at the same time, communication would be linked to that. So during that lesson, the participants deliberately get a chance to practice their communication skills. And then that's just one example. And then sports for development is also about trying to address societal issues. And in particular, we look, for example, at the Sustainable Development Goals. So we ask ourselves, how can sport be used to improve education? How can sport be used to reduce poverty? How can sport be used to address gender-related issues? And I can go on. There are 17 goals, and we focus on about 11 out of the 17, where sport actually can play a role. So that is the world of sports for development, intentionally and deliberately using sport as a tool to develop individuals and to address societal issues, as opposed to the normal approach where it's all about winning and medals, etc. And we want to declare a national day of mourning if South Africa didn't win a single medal at the Olympics. But the world of sports for development doesn't particularly care about medals at the Olympics, but it cares about medals in life.
And so what skills are you teaching young people, and how does it help them in real life?
Look, we've developed a whole set of skills and manuals. I'll just give you an example. We developed a manual called Sport to Work Skills. So we deliberately look at what skills does a young person need to get a job and to keep a job, for example. And then we develop sport programs that link those skills. In life skills, we've got about a set of about 8 life skills, including financial literacy, communication, leadership, self-esteem, resilience, etc. So those are a few examples of the life skills that we focus on. And as I said, we don't do it separately as boring lectures. We integrate it into the sports skills that we teach. And I've done a lot of this training. Surprisingly, not in South Africa. We've been battling with federations to take this seriously.
So where have you been telling?
A lot of my training has been in Namibia. Before COVID, I did a lot of training, and I'm busy with a project in Namibia right now, looking at transforming the approach to school sport, trying to integrate these two approaches into one. So I think in that respect, a country like Namibia is perhaps way ahead of what South Africa is doing.
I see we've got a question from our online audience. The youth of today are not aware of SACOS. Tell us more. Harry Hendricks was an ardent promoter of the SACOS philosophy.
Yeah, as I indicated, SACOS really shaped many of us as young sports administrators. And Harry Hendricks was involved in swimming and athletics, and his son Denver, Harry passed, but his son Denver is still around, although retired. So those were some of the SACOS stalwarts. Admittedly, down the line, a number of us developed ideological differences with SACOS. As the UDF was formed and the ANC started to emerge from abroad, we did have ideological differences, and some of us left SACOS. But without a doubt, in our formative years, SACOS played a pivotal role, and SACOS must be recognized for the role that they played in non-racial sport in the country. I hope I answered that question.
Okay, so maybe let's go back to your teaching young people. How do you see what you're teaching? How does it impact on the social problems that many people are experiencing in our country? How does it make a difference to that?
Yeah, and what I didn't mention, and just to mention that in response to your question, that the other thing that sport does, to run a sports club or sports organization, you obviously can't do it with sporting skills alone. So, and all young people don't have sporting skills. But a young person may have a skill to chair a meeting. So when you're teaching them administrative skills and leadership skills, now they play an administrative role. They can take minutes, they can draw up a budget, they can bank, they can fundraise. And we've both seen that in action. So all of those things are contributing to the development of young people, but not only them playing sport, but playing those roles. Marketing, I mean, young people are whiz kids on their phones now. I have to phone my granddaughter if I've got a problem with my phone. So trying to use all those skills of young people, and I've seen how that genuinely contributes to them building their self-esteem. Normally it's only the person that won the javelin that gets called up to the assembly. But now using this kind of holistic approach, you see how it builds people's self-esteem. With someone who can't run to save their lives, but they are standing up and communicating. They are recruiting other kids. It's just amazing, some of the things I've experienced and seen, how sport really uplifts people.
So why do you think there's so little uptake among South African sports federations for the kind of training that you're doing? Surely they could be benefiting, and society could be benefiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we point out to them all the time, when you adopt this holistic approach to sport, you even open yourself up to more funding opportunities, more than only the traditional sponsorship. So I honestly can't answer that question. I've asked some of my good friends in sport. Can you imagine if football in Cape Town says, and I don't mean to step on my good friend Bennett's toes, but just generally speaking, football says, how can we deliberately and intentionally reduce gangsterism and teenage pregnancy? And deliberately include programs around that in their normal under 12, under 14 tournaments, whatever the case may be. And this approach is not dependent on equipment or facilities, etc. This approach around talking about, the starting point is, what do you have? So you can do programs in the streets, you don't need expensive. So in terms of barriers, there are hardly any barriers. The only barriers lie here in people's attitude, what they're used to. I think people are too comfortable with what they are used to. I don't see any barriers. I don't understand what the reasons are why people wouldn't want to improve health or reduce social ills using sport as a tool, and they have a captive audience.
What is the thing that has impressed you the most about the society that we are today, as opposed to where we were, 31 years ago and more?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in an era where I could not exercise my franchise. I could not exercise my vote. I was regarded as an enemy of the state. I spent some time in detention, not as much time as others did. So having opportunity, and it sounds a bit cliched, if you will, but having a society where I can express my will, and that is why some of the things happening in the States really, really irritates me, where people's democratic rights are trampled on. I have the right to run for office if I want to. By the way, I did. I have the right to express myself. I have the right to have whatever opinion I want about Hamas, about Palestine, about whoever I want to. So for me, that is a feature, and it's something I talk to my children and sometimes even my grandchildren, and try to explain to them the kind of lives we had to live under apartheid persecution, as opposed to the freedoms they take for granted now.
Which corporations promote sports development in underserviced areas? That's a question that one should probably be asking the corporations, but...
Yeah, I mean, this issue of money, in my view, with respect to the person who asked the question, is often used as an excuse not to do anything. So the person asks which corporation supports sport. And my point of view is, you don't need a corporation to support sport in your community. And I don't care where you come from. In whatever community, be it Khayelitsha, Gugulethu, Lotus River, Hanover Park, the number of employed people is more than the number of unemployed people. That's point number one. Point number two, if you look around you and you're prepared to identify and use resources effectively, you will find whatever you need is already there. So you can take a 2-liter Coke bottle and you fill it with sand and you've got cones. Now, I mean, that sounds like a silly example. But very often the issue of money, we say we don't have corporates supporting us, but very often the lack of a plan to get resources is your main problem. So I can't answer which corporations, but I'm saying to you, if you live in Hanover Park and there's a Dawood's Butchery and you haven't asked Dawood's Butchery, like we did back in the day, Ryland, you haven't asked Dawood's Butchery for 100 pieces of sausage so that you can make boerewors rolls to sell in your community, to buy balls for your community, then you shouldn't be asking the question about corporations, bigger corporations. I very often in my training use Brazed, an imaginary character. If you haven't asked Brazed in your community, if you haven't engaged with it, then it means you don't have a plan to get resources. So planning around resources for me is the big issue. Sorry to my friend that asked the question, a long answer to your short question.
Okay, so let's go back to, we talked about the positive things in our society, and what is the thing that has disappointed you most about where we are as a country today?
Yeah, I think probably most of your future speakers may say the same thing. I think our political structures, for me, has been disappointing. We were all grew up with the UDF and the Congress movement and the ANC, etc., and we were really looking forward to a liberation movement to take us to prosperity. And respectfully, that has not happened. At some point in time, I'll be very honest with you and your viewers, I left the ANC. I returned to the ANC in the Ramaphosa era. But respectfully, we still haven't been able to really crack inequality, unemployment, and poverty in our country. And that, for me, has been the biggest disappointment.
So I actually have a similar question to the corporate thing about how, and I hear what you're saying and I agree with you completely, but do you think that government and corporates understand the value of sport beyond the big sport we have lucrative sponsorships based on winning World Cups and stuff like that. Do you think government and corporates understand the value of sport enough?
In my opinion, absolutely not. And one of the classic examples, and I'm going to step on toes, I don't care or mind, and maybe you want me to cross the line from time to time. I'll take the city of Cape Town as a classic example. We used to have a Department of Sport and Recreation there. It no longer exists. They took the word sport out. And that's precisely because they don't understand the value of sport. They see sport as 11 people kicking a ball against another 11 people. But I mean, in the time that we've spent together already, there's a different world of sport. So that shows to me that local government doesn't understand that. This whole notion of sports for development, which also focuses on inclusivity. Exclusivity is just not part of this approach. So what do I mean? Currently, you choose your best 15 players for your soccer team, 11 on the field and 4 on the bench. In the sports for all approach, including everybody is non-negotiable. So I think if I had been the minister, I would have focused on programs that gets every child in this country physically active and participating in physical education and sport. In fact, we spend millions, 200 million, on the games, national games bringing, or let's not say 200 million on one set of games, but on a program that really focuses on a few learners. So short answer, I don't think that corporates and government actually understand what sport is. Their view is formed by the media, focuses on elite sport and competitive sport, but there's so much more that sport can do to reduce some of the social ills I referred to earlier.
Okay, so I see we've got another question from a very curious viewer saying that Trevor Manuel mentioned you in his book. Can you please tell us more about it?
Ryland, you know the mention, and is it Peyton Groenewald? Peyton, I can't go into too much detail, but let's just say at some point in my life, I was a teacher and I was helping people with safe houses, let's put it that way. And I provided some a safe house for Trevor Manuel, and he was arrested in my little house in the middle of the night, and for some reason he was not able to wake me up. I'm going to leave it there if you don't mind, Peyton. You may have to wait for my book. Or go and read Trevor Manuel's book, even better.
Yeah, thank you. You alluded to the fact that if you were the minister of what do they call it now, sport, arts, and culture, what you would do in terms of getting children active. But if President Ramaphosa calls you tomorrow and say, listen, I watched Ryland's podcast and I'm offering you the job, what would be your priorities?
When we, in the training we do, for example, we speak about something called a sports development continuum, which on the one hand focuses on elite sport. We do need elite sport models. I'm not going to suggest for 1 minute that having a Benny McCarthy or Desiree Ellis doesn't help to uplift and motivate young people. The second level beyond that is about participation, getting people to join clubs, be part of clubs in all its aspects, play their weekly sport. But what I would also concentrate on, if I get this opportunity, is really developing leadership. Back in the day, we did a lot about developing and training administrators and leaders. So I would definitely focus on that, getting more clubs in our communities. And then the part around sports for development, just getting people physically active. And when I say people, I mean people of all ages. And that's another problem. We focus on children and youth almost by default. But you and I went for a walk on Sunday morning on the mountain. Why can there not be more of those programs targeting middle-aged people like yourself, the elderly, etc.? So I would really have an inclusive approach to sport, and then just getting more people to be physically active. There's so much advantages that comes with that. So I would focus on the entire spectrum, and it's possible. And this doesn't need to increase or double the budget. It can be done with existing resources. So yes, President Ramaphosa, You know my number? If not, we'll send it to you.
And of course, as the president, I'm offering you the position of Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. You've only spoken about sport. What would you do about arts and culture?
I'm actually working on a little program. I really hope it can come to fruition this year. And I genuinely believe that every child at a school would be born with some kind of talent. And we've seen how talented our children are when it comes to culture, music, singing, etc., etc. And again, it's just the very similar approach that I'm using to sport. It's simply trying to find what are the talents and creating opportunities and outlets. But not only for government-run programs, we've got to encourage and enable people to run their own programs. And government can and should play an enabling role.
Maybe just coming back to governments and corporates. I mean, we've talked about government, and obviously you're right about ordinary people getting involved. So what can ordinary supporters of sport do to help government and big corporates pay more respect to, especially the smaller sports codes? And I mean, is there a way in which ordinary people out there can help you get that message to government about the nation becoming more active?
Look, let me start with a positive. There are a few positive initiatives already on the go, and those initiatives can be expanded if they have more funding. So, for example, Lotto has put some money into sport. That's another story for another day. Sometimes I think they themselves don't understand sport, and their conditions are far too onerous to really benefit. But admittedly, Lotto has put in some. There's something called the Sports Trust, again, which focuses more on some of the smaller codes. So imagine corporates and government and even wealthy individuals puts more money into something like the Sports Trust, where they do focus more on the smaller codes. In South Africa, we've got an organization called the Sports for Social Change Network. About 150 plus organizations using sport as a tool. Very few federations in there, maybe 2 or 3. So if more resources and more focus is put on organizations like that, who's deliberately educating and encouraging and helping and supporting organizations, mainly NGOs, unfortunately, that's active in this space of using sport as a tool to address a whole range of issues. So it's identifying those organizations and structures and putting more money into that. And maybe incentivizing the federations to get involved in this element of sport, using sport as a tool.
South Africa is a very political country. But there are some people who believe that we must keep politics out of sport. What do you say to those people? And here I'm thinking particularly about people who talk, for instance, when they talk about quotas, that there's no place for quotas in sport, etc., etc. Is it possible to keep politics out of sport?
Now, with the history of our country, I mean, just to be blunt, as we're heading towards the end, it is just simply not possible. Transformation, we come from 300 plus years of oppression. So transformation will be with us for a long time, and it should be with us for a long time. And we're not only looking at quotas transformation when it comes to people on the field, transformation in a whole range of aspects that I've spoken about, transformation in sponsorship, transformation in leadership, etc. So I don't buy that argument. Whoever says that, it's a very narrow definition of what politics is. And I think we have seen the benefits of transformation on our TV screens on a daily basis. I hope your viewers don't object. But if we take a look at the Varsity Cup final on, was it Monday or Tuesday evening? Monday evening, Martis versus UCT. Both captains, black captains. Now, I'm not saying they're not there on merit, but I always ask myself, if we did not have a transformation program, what is the likelihood that we would end up with 2 black captains, both playing brilliant rugby?
You've thought a lot about sport and so on in society. As we approach Freedom Day and we reflect again on where we come from as a society, what is it that you would really want us to do as a country, from a sporting perspective and maybe also from an arts and culture perspective to move forward?
Yeah. Let me start by saying I don't put myself only in those boxes. I'm really concerned broadly about some of the issues facing us. On the one hand, I'm not harking back to the good old days. But in the good old days, we really had strong organizations. We had strong youth structures. I was part and you were part of youth structures. We met on a Monday night to plan, and on a Thursday night we implemented. Weekends we took youth away on walks and camps, etc. So for me, part of the answer lies in communities, community organizations and community structures being helped to be much stronger. I was fortunate I didn't mention it thus far, and that I'm not only in sport. I trained about 45 neighborhood watch structures before COVID. And an example, I think a lot of the community safety challenges in communities can be solved by the communities themselves if they had strong community structures, strong neighborhood watch structures. How can the Oma that doesn't do patrolling, how can she play a role in making her community safe? So for me, in a short answer to your question, the answer lies in the rest of us playing our role in developing leaders, in identifying and developing leaders, and having really, really strong. The reason why a community deems it fit to burn down a library is because there's not a strong structure in that community that's taking a responsibility. I'd like to end off, and I do this in most of my workshops, and sometimes I give people an award if they can identify this poet. And I want to end off on this note. If you really want to solve the problems in our country, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. And that, of course, is Michael Jackson, the man in the mirror.
I was going to end the show there, but I see we have a question from Ridwan Hendricks. What is the most memorable sports experience you have undertaken, and how has that shaped your vision and attitude to the future?
I must read the one Hendricks end with such a difficult question. I was just relieved that it's almost over. Ridwan, the issue of highlights was asked by Ryland earlier on, and there are so many. And let's say the most memorable sports experience, you asked that question. And let me end on that light note. I play an occasional bit of golf, and 1 year, golf is a lot of luck involved, Ryland. And 1 year I actually won the Cape Town version of the Sanlam Cancer Challenge. Now that is huge. And I got to play 2 rounds at Sun City. So Ridwan, my most memorable experience is winning the Sanlam Cancer Challenge in Cape Town. I won my club competition by 1 shot in the dark. And then I got to play at Sun City. Don't ask how I fared at Sun City. Can we please end on that note?
Thank you, Mr. Jurgens, for being an interesting and informative guest. And thank you to Mobilearn for the invaluable support. Thank you for the technical staff who do things behind the scenes to make me look good. And thank you for the guests who joined us online. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Thank you for watching Crossing the Line. We welcome your input so that we can improve the show. If there are any guests that you think we should invite on the show, please let us know. My name is Ryland Fisher, and it has been an absolute pleasure hosting Crossing the Line. Until we meet again, goodbye.